Now, after retrieving from Avdiivka over the weekend, Ukrainian troops regrouped to launch a major offensive to capture the city. But Moscow says Russian troops inflicted heavy damage on 3 Ukrainian army brigades, killing or wounding roughly 565 Ukrainian troops. Our next report getting you more.
Avdiivka has fallen. The Ukrainians have retreated, but the Russians aren't relenting. Ukrainians are now fighting off dozens of attacks in multiple regions. Kyiv has now pressed panic buttons.
Now the situation is extremely difficult in several parts of the front, precisely where Russian troops have concentrated the maximum reserves. They're taking advantage of the delay in helping Ukraine. And these are very tangible things. The shortage of artillery, the need for frontline air defense and greater range of our weapons.
The trees are splintered, the houses wrecked. The surviving civilians are living in basements, and the NATO ammunition lies abandoned. This is the picture revealed by footage that Russia has released from the ruins of the Ukrainian town of Avdiivka.
Of course it's scary. We've been living in basements. We don't live in apartments, but in basements instead. Our apartment has been destroyed. When the special operation started, we went down to the basements. I live in other district at Mendeleev.
Amid signs of crumbling Western support for Ukraine, Russian forces captured the eastern stronghold of Avdiivka over the weekend after a fierce battle. The action set the stage for a potential Russian push deeper into the Ukrainian-held territory. Following Russia's capture of Avdiivka, people in nearby Selidov are wondering if they will be next.
I am not a military man, so I can't really make the connection with the offensive on Avdiivka. But you can draw your own conclusions. We are now seeing an exodus of people from the towns of Pokrovsk and Seldov. We can see that people who have somewhere to go have already started to leave.
Amid the fierce battles in the east, Russia has sought to cripple Ukraine's defense industries with a steady series of strikes. It has used long-range cruise and ballistic missiles, as well as the Iranian-made Shahid drones to overwhelm Ukrainian air defenses. In retaliation, Ukraine has launched audacious attacks on oil terminals and refineries deep inside Russia, and also its naval and air assets in the Black Sea region. But Moscow has more boots on the ground and more ammunition in its arsenal. And with European weapons shipments drying up for Ukraine and no help coming from Washington, Zelensky has a tough battle ahead. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now, to discuss this further, we are being joined by William Courtney from Washington, D.C. He is an adjunct senior fellow at RAND Global think tank. Mr. Courtney, thank you so much for joining us here on WION. My first question to you is straight. The fall of Avdiivka, is it symbolic or strategic?
It is a little bit of both. It's useful to remember that since 2014, Russian troops have controlled much of 2 eastern regions in Ukraine, Luhansk and Donetsk. And so Avdiivka and before that Bakhmut have both been cities that are in those regions. And so Russians have had a long time to prepare for that. They are not the most strategic cities, though. So overall, what we're seeing is a stalemate really in the ground fight. But as your reporter pointed out, in the naval fight, Ukrainians are really on the offensive. They've been sinking quite a few, I think up to a third of the Black Sea big warships that Russians have, and they've driven a number of the others to the eastern part of the Black Sea. And then in the air, neither side has been able to achieve air superiority over the other because ground-based air defenses have been so effective. Looking ahead, the Europeans have just unlocked $50 billion of support for Ukraine. And here in Washington, with perhaps assistance of the death of Alexei Navalny, Congress may soon pass assistance for Ukraine.
Mr. Courtney, I would quickly interject. Speaking of aid, do you think one of the reasons Avdiivka fell was because of the lack of Western supply of weapons to Ukraine? And also, do you think that the reason could cost Volodymyr Zelensky more cities?
The shortage of ammunition certainly has had an impact. Russian forces have fired more rounds of ammunition than Ukrainians have been able to fire recently. In that Donetsk and Luhansk regions where the Russians have been for a decade, it's possible that the Russians will take more area, but that may not be indicative of the fight in other parts of Ukraine.
Mr. Courtney, let's broaden our lens here a little. United States has been the biggest financer of Ukraine's fight against, Ukraine's fight against Russia. In fact, if I could give you some figure here, so far the country has provided a total of $68 billion. I want to ask you, do you think there is fatigue setting in now, and how volatile is this commitment going to become in case Donald Trump is elected this November?
So, in fact, we don't really see signs of fatigue. There is some opposition among some of the more isolationist parts of the far left and the far right in the United States. But if there were a vote in the House of Representatives on the aid bill, most all Democrats would support it, and probably half of Republicans. So the bill would easily pass, and the Senate vote would be even stronger. And then in Europe, Europeans seem to be getting stronger in their support for Ukraine. So not only did the new $50 billion European Union package go through, but also we see other actions. So Denmark, for example, is providing all of its artillery to Ukraine. So there is no real fatigue in the West.
All right, Mr. Courtney, as we speak, the U.S. Congress is on a winter break as the vital aid to Ukraine, of course, hangs in balance. But so far, thank you so much for speaking to us here on WION and getting us all those insights.
You're welcome.